Carroll O'Connor was not a performer who drifted through his work on instinct alone. He was deliberate, careful, almost surgical in the way he approached character. To the public, he became immortal as Archie Bunker, a loud, stubborn, politically incorrect figure who dominated America's living rooms. But what viewers rarely saw was the discipline beneath the performance. O'Connor believed that television, especially comedy, carried responsibility. It wasn't enough to provoke laughter. It had to provoke thought. That belief shaped everything he did, including one decision he would quietly carry for the rest of his life. A decision not shouted, not explained, but enforced through silence. One name, once central to his career, would never again be spoken by him in public. And in Hollywood, silence often speaks louder than accusation. When All in the Family premiered, it did not feel like a safe bet. Television at the time preferred comfort, familiarity, and clear moral lines. This show offered none of that. Instead, it walked directly into America's deepest social tensions and refused to soften them. Race, class, gender, politics, generational conflict, everything collided at one dining table. At the center stood Archie Bunker, a man designed not to be admired but examined. Carroll O'Connor understood this from the start. Archie was not the joke, he was the mirror. The humor came from contradiction, from discomfort, from recognition. And across from him sat Mike Stivic, younger, educated, and ideologically certain. Together, they didn't just argue. They staged a national conversation, one episode at a time. What made their on-screen dynamic unforgettable was how real it felt. The pauses mattered. The silences lingered. The arguments didn't resolve neatly. Audiences didn't tune in just for punchlines. They tuned in to watch beliefs collide. That authenticity wasn't accidental. It was built through tension, rehearsal, and restraint. O'Connor treated Archie as a fully formed human being, not a symbol. He obsessed over rhythm and intention. Every outburst had a reason. Every prejudice had a history. Archie was ignorant, but he wasn't hollow. That balance was fragile, and O'Connor knew it. Pushed too far in either direction, and the character collapsed into caricature. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was far more complicated than the laughter suggested. O'Connor came from an old-school acting philosophy rooted in craft and control. Scripts were dissected. Motivations were questioned. Nothing was casual. His co-star approached the work differently. Younger, more politically vocal, he increasingly viewed the show as a platform for clear ideological statements. Early on, those differences stayed manageable. Professionalism kept things steady. But as ratings soared and the show became a cultural institution, the creative tension intensified. Success didn't smooth the cracks, it widened them. Crew members later recalled that nothing ever exploded publicly. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches on set. Instead, the conflict simmered. Disagreements became sharper. Rewrites became more frequent. O'Connor began pushing back on dialogue that felt designed to score moral points rather than reveal character. His concern wasn't politics. It was storytelling. He believed Archie only worked if viewers were allowed to wrestle with him, not simply reject him. If the show became preachy, it lost its power. Writers often listened, because O'Connor was usually right about what rang true. But the philosophical divide kept growing. As confidence grew on the other side, so did the willingness to alter scenes, sometimes during live tapings. Improvised lines shifted tone. Jokes landed harder, sharper, occasionally tipping Archie from flawed human into ideological punching bag. For an actor who built performances beat by beat, this was destabilizing. To O'Connor, it wasn't about ego. It was about control of meaning. Who decides what the character ultimately represents? Who protects the balance once the audience is watching? One incident, often recalled quietly by those who were there, crystallized the tension. O'Connor objected to a scene he felt crossed a line. He asked for adjustments. The request was refused. The episode aired largely unchanged. To viewers, nothing seemed wrong. To O'Connor, it confirmed something deeper, that his interpretation of Archie was slowly being overridden. From that point on, something shifted. He remained professional. The performances never slipped, but off-camera, trust narrowed. Conversations shortened. A line had been crossed, even if no one named it aloud. For a long time, the conflict stayed contained within the studio walls. Uncomfortable but survivable. Then it spilled into public view. During an interview about the show's cultural impact, O'Connor's co-star was asked what Archie Bunker represented. The answer began cautiously, then hardened. Archie was framed not as a contradiction to examine, but as a danger to reject outright. The implication was clear. Subtlety was risky. Ambiguity could be misread. To the audience, it sounded like commentary. To Carroll O'Connor, it felt like betrayal. O'Connor had spent years defending Archie's humanity, not his beliefs. He believed prejudice didn't come from nowhere. It was inherited, taught, normalized. Flattening Archie into a villain erased the very lesson the show was built to explore. Worse, those comments were repeated, simplified, and broadcast widely. Suddenly, O'Connor found himself defending not just a character, but his own values. Some viewers blurred the line between actor and role. He denied it repeatedly, but the damage lingered. Friends later said he felt abandoned. Left alone to carry the moral weight of a character others were now distancing themselves from. O'Connor never responded publicly. No rebuttals, no counter-interviews. Instead, he withdrew. In conversations, he praised the writers, the producers, Gene Stapleton, everyone except the man who had stood opposite him for years. This wasn't a temporary chill. It was a decision. Silence for Carroll O'Connor was deliberate. He believed something essential had been broken, not by disagreement, but by erasure. The collaboration had been reframed without him, and that line could not be uncrossed. What makes the silence especially tragic is that the show itself had already proven what the partnership could be at its best. Late in the series, an episode quietly delivered one of television's most devastating scenes. Archie and Mike are locked overnight in a storeroom. No audience spectacle, no grand confrontation, just time, alcohol, and vulnerability. Archie begins to talk not to argue, but to explain. He speaks about his father, about learning hatred through trust, not cruelty. About growing up poor, humiliated, afraid. Much of the scene was improvised. What made it work was trust. In that moment, Mike stops debating. He listens. Archie isn't corrected or mocked. He's understood. For once, prejudice is shown not as evil genius, but as inherited damage. The effect was profound. Viewers remember it as growth. O'Connor remembered it as truth. That scene proved that complexity was always the point. That understanding, not humiliation, was the show's quiet weapon, which makes what followed even more painful. After that episode, the real-life distance only grew. The irony was cruel. The deepest on-screen connection arrived just as the off-screen relationship fractured beyond repair. When the series ended, O'Connor carried Archie forward into Archie Bunker's place, still committed to uncomfortable storytelling. He never softened the character to chase approval. Later success and In the Heat of the Night expanded his legacy, but Archie's shadow never left him. His former co-star moved on differently, into directing, producing, shaping a new generation of films. Awards followed. Prestige followed. And as that career expanded, the past narrowed. All in the Family was acknowledged broadly, carefully. Its importance praised, but one name was consistently absent, and O'Connor noticed. At award ceremonies, retrospectives, industry events, the omission became a pattern. When asked about the cast, O'Connor was generous. He praised Norman Lear. He praised Gene Stapleton. He praised the writers and the risk they took. But he never spoke his former co-star's name. Not once. Reporters noticed. Colleagues noticed. This wasn't bitterness, it was boundaries. Silence as meaning. Silence as memory. When pressed directly years later, O'Connor answered carefully. Some of them, he said when asked if he missed working with the cast. When pushed further, he paused. The boy did a good job. No name, no elaboration. Precision mattered to him even then. When Carroll O'Connor died in 2001, tributes poured in. Writers praised his discipline. Actors praised his generosity. Norman Lear called him irreplaceable, but one voice was missing. No statement, no public remembrance, no farewell. So the question remains, was Carroll O'Connor right to draw that line? To let silence stand where reconciliation might have been possible? Or was the silence itself a loss, another casualty of success, ego, and public narrative? This story isn't about villains. It's about how collaboration fractures when meaning is contested, about how art suffers when complexity is simplified, and about how sometimes the loudest statement a person can make is choosing not to speak at all. Now we leave it to you. Was the silence justified? Or should the past have been laid to rest? Share your thoughts below. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about what really happens behind iconic television, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next untold chapter.